feature hate and full of and acceptance. In addition to several other creative projects underway, Dan has used his own personal platform to elevate awareness for marginalized voices and has become an outspoken champion for causes spanning LGBTQ advocacy to Indigenous rights and education. We are absolutely delighted to have you here with us today at Cornerstone Convergence. Dan, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a warm welcome.
Awesome. All right, let's get started. Part of our Convergence theme starts with the recognition that each individual has unique talents and skills which are shaped through their early experiences and developed well into their career. So we wanted to start there with you. How did your family and your learning experiences growing up help shape and nurture your creativity?
Gosh, I don't think I've ever been asked that question before.
We got a unique one. All right.
It's comprehensive. I feel like I have, looking back on my life, I think there are things that you do as a kid and things that you do as a teen that you kind of don't ever connect the dots on. And I have always been someone who loved to build things, particularly like theatrical related things. When I was in the early, elementary school years, I would stage plays in my basement with my friends, and I would write them and I would direct them and I would star in them and, produce them and get them made. And they were, cats in my parents' basement is not what I would necessarily charge money for. But now looking back on it, it was the beginning of a curiosity. And that built, in sixth grade, I ended up writing our school play and starring in it. And then in high school, writing and producing most of our school plays. It's kind of, I've had this desire to like make things that involve teams of people in a theatrical kind of sense. And that's something I only connected the dots on like very recently when I looked back and thought, I kind of have been producing from a very young age. I just wasn't aware of it. And then I got a job on MTV up in Canada for many, years. And that was a huge learning experience. Again, it was a playground for me to build things for myself, for, my co-host and I to kind of build a show together with our producers from the ground up, from scratch, that ended up being kind of successful at the time. It was that kind of gave me the platform to then move on and try and build something else. And I knew that unscripted television, that hosting television was not something I ever really wanted to do, and that I always wanted to go back to kind of theater and acting and performing. And so from that came this idea for Schitt's Creek. And I brought it to my dad, and collectively, we, again, built something from the ground up, and here we are. So looking back, I think I've always been an incredibly sort of proactive person when it comes to getting things done. I'll have an idea. I will sort of push that idea through until completion. And it's kind of benefited me in the sense that I think follow through is such an important part of the puzzle. Like a lot of people, I think, get inherently intimidated by follow through, or they don't know how to follow through. And that is something that I think has come quite naturally to me. And it's something that I'm aware of and have tried with my relative success now to try and see in other people. Because follow through is a really daunting thing for a lot of people. So now it's like if I have friends that are writers that I think who have really strong voices that I think the world needs to see, you lift them up, you give them opportunities, you collaborate with them. And it's about paying it forward, because only now am I able to realize, how powerful follow through is and how intimidating it can be for many people. So you got to sort of take your strengths and use them to help other people, and hopefully their strengths will in turn help you.
So can you share a little bit about how you used both the follow through, those strengths you talked about, and your creative skills to meet the big moments of change and to overcome some of the obstacles that perhaps you faced?
Well, I think change happens when you're not really paying attention. So for me, it's really been about doing the best possible job that I can. I have kind of perfectionist tendencies, and that's not a brag. It, in many cases, is kind of a burden. But I think when you are questing to do the best job you possibly can, you're too preoccupied with doing the work to look around and notice the change. And so I think because I tend to be distracted during these sort of, at least over the past 6-8 years with the advent of the show and its subsequent success and a lot of change in my life, I still am not fully aware of that change. Because for me, it's always about the work. I have very little interest in kind of the fame element of it. There are obviously some fun things that come along with it. You know, I love fashion, and it's allowed me to kind of be adventurous in that arena in ways that I probably would never have access to. But I don't know. I think humility is always really important. That's something that I've learned from my family, who have really kind of made it clear that despite any success in our family, we are going to stay as close to who we were as we possibly can be. That people knowing your name has nothing to do with who you are as a person or your values or what you're bringing to the table. So at the end of the day, I think a focus on being a good leader, a focus on doing good work, and ultimately, you know, an aspiration to hopefully pay that good work off by helping other people. There's not a ton of room to be aware of the change. And I think that's a good thing. It's just when you are, you know, in the case of entertainment, when you happen to have some success in entertainment, it's a very big, glamorous hoopla that kind of surrounds that success that can be really, I think, destabilizing and distracting for people. Give people a false sense of importance. At the end of the day, an actor's success is so tightly dependent on writers and directors and crew that it's not an individual journey. It is an entirely group. It's a group activity. So I try to constantly be aware of how necessary the group is in the creative process, because the minute you start thinking, I am the person that did this, or I am the important part of this puzzle, that's when you lose touch with the fact that everything is interconnected, especially in a creative field, as I'm sure it is in any kind of field. But, you know, I think anyone can handle change well if they're self-aware and they're not letting that change get to their ego and start to kind of corrode that part of your life.
So let's talk a little bit more about, you mentioned that group, and I think that's really interesting. I mean, Schitt's Creek, it obviously started as a spark and an idea, and then it eventually grew into one of the most celebrated shows on TV. And as co-producer, writer, and actor, and showrunner for the series, this was obviously a passion, and you had to become a leader in your own right, though, with that group. Mm-hmm. That team leadership aspect is something we wanted to explore a little bit further. You brought together an incredibly talented cast and crew, each with their own unique experiences and skills. What were some of your biggest lessons learned in leading such a talented team and uniting them around the show's mission and purpose?
Well, I think a lot of what I brought to that experience was lessons that I learned being an employee under someone else's sort of supervision. Mm-hmm. And there have been a handful of situations in my life where I have been working for people where I have felt undervalued or taken advantage of or underappreciated. And I think that's the most like soul-crushing feeling when you are working in a team, to feel like the work you're doing is going unnoticed or, you know, is not being appreciated. It doesn't make you want to work hard. Mm-hmm. And the reality is things don't work unless everybody is working hard. So when I came into starting Schitt's Creek, I went straight back to all of those experiences and said, I am not going to have anybody on my team feel that way. I'm going to try everything I possibly can to make sure that every member of our team, every person that we hire comes on board and stays on board feeling appreciated and like they are a vital part of our success. I never talk about my show. It's always our show. It is a team effort. And, at the end of the day, if the person who's in craft services is not serving food for people, you're going to have angry actors on set. If you have, a boom operator who's holding a boom all day and they're not showing up, you don't have the quality of audio that you need. I mean, there are so many crucial pieces of the puzzle that you always have to be aware of. And I think one of the things that I did from the very beginning was send, like, at the time it was weekly emails. And then once our team started, getting sort of in their groove, it became monthly emails about what they were doing right. It was a thank you for X, Y, and Z. And the number of people who responded to those emails and said, thank you for this, I've never received this before, was frankly like terrifying, because it's a very simple thing to do. And yet at the same time, it goes such a long way. For me, it wasn't even a question. It was, I have seen firsthand how much work has gone into a show that my name is on. I'm not going to just take credit for that and run away. I'm going to be grateful and acknowledge the work that's gone into putting this show on television that has my name on it.
Sure.
So that obviously comes with its own ups and downs. And, when there's an intense amount of pressure on your shoulders, and I was doing 1,000 things, sometimes you forget to send those emails. And sometimes, tensions arise and you can't catch them, or maybe you start them inadvertently. And it was always about figuring out what the problem was. My mom's whole philosophy in life with me growing up, whenever there was conflict, was before you point a finger at someone else, first ask yourself, what is my part in this? And that has always led to, for me, has always paved a pretty solid path through this sort of most recent journey of my life. Any kind of conflict resolution has always been made easier by acknowledging your part in things, or at least beginning to analyze what your part was so that you can better understand perhaps the dynamic of that tension, if there is any to begin with. So, it's not a perfect, nobody is perfect, but at least if the intention is there and you try your best to make sure that this is a team, this team needs to feel just as the person, serving the food every day needs to feel just as crucial to that team as the actor who's stepping on set or whose face is on the poster. And I think as a result, the joy that I've experienced knowing that our team has felt like when we won the Emmy for Best Comedy Series, they felt like that was a part of them, that they felt like they had a stake in that. It wasn't something that was separated from them. Our win last year was their win. And I truly believe that they felt that ownership over that. And that's an incredibly fulfilling, feeling for me.
Absolutely. A lot of feedback and recognition, and wow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can tell you all brought such happiness and laughter to the screen with Schitt's Creek. In fact, when I say screen, I mean every screen. Your social media team is on point, and they have created one of the most memorable collections of memes and GIFs ever made. I've made my own purchases on Etsy. But at its center, the spirit of the show is really embodied in the Schitt's Creek town motto, a place where everyone fits in. Mm-hmm. And that aspiration of a place where each person is celebrated for who they are has really had a resounding impact on people and families and even workplaces around the world. And that includes our team here at Cornerstone. We've used David Rowe's Just Wine analogies to help build allyship with our LGBTQ employee resource groups and to reinforce our culture of inclusiveness across the company. So this is just one more example of how the impact of your work extends from individuals and families to communities and to organizations themselves. Now, Dan, I know you're a humble Canadian, but could you have ever imagined how far your message of love and inclusiveness would have spread? And how do you reflect on that?
No, I don't think we ever, it was never our goal. The intention of the show was to hopefully, celebrate small town life and show how money doesn't necessarily solve your problems. And everything that happened in between, the growth, the change, the decision that we made to make Schitt's Creek a place where homophobia didn't exist, bigotry didn't exist, intolerance of any kind didn't exist. It was in a way, looking back, it was kind of like quietly revolutionary in the sense that we weren't shoving an agenda down anyone's throats. We were simply proposing a slightly more ideal, a slightly more kind world. And I think our show promoting those messages, coinciding with a lot of political and social turmoil where people wanted to find stability and safety in a place that made them feel safe and in a half hour that you can escape into somewhere a little bit more peaceful and a little bit kinder. I think that the interconnectedness of our social climate with the stories we were telling is really kind of what ended up making the show, changed the show from just being a comedy to something that I think people felt an incredible emotional connection to. That is something that we could never have intended, but I'm so glad. And it always, I think all of us, any of us who are sort of stopped and told how significant a role the show has played in people's lives. I mean, it's always such a compliment. And I think the greatest takeaway for all of us, knowing that what we were doing, even though it's a comedy, and I think a lot of people write off comedy as being kind of frivolous or inconsequential, it's really nice to know that that we kind of exist in people's lives in a very special and emotional and at times kind of formative or significant way. So it's a wonderful sort of takeaway from everything.
Awesome. Well, I know you've continued to use your voice and your platform to support important causes and elevate marginalized groups, which has also really inspired your fans, by the way. Can you tell us about some of the latest causes that you're passionate about? And we'd also love to know a bit more about some of your upcoming creative projects as well.
When you get a certain level of success, it's always felt, and maybe this is the Canadian in me, but it's always felt uncomfortable to kind of sit there and receive. It always feels important and necessary that whenever something good happens to me, that I try and do my best to make something good happen for someone else. I'm talking more in terms of my work with other writers. This has nothing to do with kind of the more the work that I've been doing with, the Faculty of Native Studies. That is not me doing good for someone else. That is this course that I took doing so much good for me that it became a necessity for me to share that with other people. I think at the end of the day, you try and just do the best job you can. And I think we're living in a world where social media has given people a platform that reaches so many people. And it feels irresponsible not to use that platform in a way that sheds light on real issues that need to be addressed. And for me, over the past kind of year and a half, working with the Faculty of Native Studies out of the University of Alberta, helping to promote their course, which is essentially reteaching the history of Canada through the Indigenous community's perspectives. That's necessary. That is a necessary thing that everyone needs to do, because I think what we've realized recently is that so many of us have been taught a skewed idea of how our countries come to be. And the reality is it's not true.
Right.
There were people here long before, the European settlers arrived. And so that course was so eye-opening for me. All I simply did was try to get people to also participate so that we could become better allies. It's hard to really be a substantial ally for people if you have no idea what they're going through, what they've been through, and what they have to go through. It's so much more than a 2-minute answer here. But again, it all stems from, you got people paying attention, use that for something other than yourself. You can do both.
Well, in our final minutes with you, I'd ask what guidance you'd share with our customers, HR and talent leaders, about how their organizations can create an environment that embraces the individual's strengths and experiences of each person and unites everyone around a common purpose?
I think it goes back to an emphasis on making sure that people who are showing up every day are feeling welcome and feeling inspired and feeling a part of something. Because I think it's very easy for us to kind of get into the rhythm of going to work. We show up, we go home, we don't necessarily think about what other people are going through in their personal lives. The fact that we don't all think the same way. I'm a very kind of ambitious, aggressive person, and it's hard for me sometimes to not understand how other people aren't that way, how other people don't see things the way that I see things. But the reality is we're all built differently, and that's great.
Well, I think we have a great roadmap with humility and recognition and appreciation. Mm-hmm. So Dan, this has been such a wonderful conversation, and I really can't believe it's already over. Thank you so much.
It went so fast.
I know. Well, on behalf of the team at Cornerstone, our global customer community, just thank you for sharing your time and really, really inspiring us with your journey and your work. We wish you every success in your next projects, and we are so excited to see what you do next. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me, and thanks to everyone out there who was watching today. It was very nice to spend this time with you. Thanks.